Good afternoon. I'm Mark Allen with Gaber.io, and I'm here today with Matthew Stibbe, the CEO of Articulate Marketing. Good afternoon, good afternoon, Matthew. How you doing?
Good afternoon, Tom. I'm doing really well, thank you. Delighted to be here.
And where are you talking to us from? What city in the world?
Well, I am in London, England, West London, sort of halfway between the city centre and Heathrow Airport.
Ah, very nice. So can you share a brief background of yourself and your work experience?
Yes, of course. And I was just remarking, you have the Golden Gate Bridge behind you, and you were telling me about living in San Francisco. So my first job ever was running a computer games company, which I started in 1990 something. And I was always out in San Francisco. So I have a technical background and a bit of a creative background. And I sold that business in 2000 and went into journalism. And after a few years, doing freelance writing and journalism, I was writing for Wired and Space, Smithsonian, and interesting magazines like that. I started Articulate Marketing, initially doing copywriting for technology companies, and now it's sort of grown up into a big old marketing agency doing digital inbound marketing.
Oh, very nice. So what has been your experience with remote employment, both as a remote employee and an employer?
Well, that games company I mentioned, Intelligent Games, when I sold it, we had 10,000 square feet of office space, which in the grand scheme of things isn't huge, but the rent felt huge. Mm-hmm. And I had an office manager and a receptionist, and I had to pay for security. And I particularly remember being very irritated having to pay for somebody to come and fix the air conditioning. It seemed like I was trying to make computer games, and all I was doing was facilities management and office management. Mm-hmm. So the day I sold it, I remember walking out, signing all the papers, and going and sitting in my car, and it was sort of lunchtime. And I sat in my car and I went, phew, right, what do I do now? And I made two resolutions. One was, I'm never going to hire anyone again. Well, I broke that pretty quickly. And the other resolution was, I'm never going to have an office again. So that is why Articulate Marketing was founded on the principle of being a remote working company. So we've been doing it for years and years and years, long before it became fashionable, or commonplace, perhaps is better. So that's the history of Articulate, why it is not an office-based and why it is a remote-based company. My experience with remote working has been almost entirely positive. Maybe we'll get to that.
Well, yeah, well, as long as you brought it up, explain why it's positive.
Well, let me start by slaying a dragon, laying a myth to rest. For Articulate, anyway, the reason to be remote working is not about saving money. Although I was complaining about the costs at Intelligent Games. We spend at least as much on our culture and on building our team relationships, and we have quite a lot of company meetings that cost quite a lot. When we were allowed to travel, we used to bring everybody together regularly. We spend as much on that stuff as we would having an office to house us all. And we have a chief happiness officer, for example, which is not I mean, she's wonderful and worth every penny, but it's not a cheap decision to hire somebody to work solely on the culture in a relatively small company. No, so it's not about saving money. The positives are, first of all, no commuting, right? I don't like it. I didn't like doing it. The few jobs I've had as a writer where I've had to go and visit people, I don't like doing that. And now Articulate has become a B Corp and we're carbon neutral. We offset all our carbon consumption. It's actually a really satisfying part of the business that nobody has to commute. So that. I mentioned earlier that I don't like being a facilities manager, so I don't have to worry about that. I just have to keep my own house nice and tidy. But the real benefit, I think, is around the people. You hire in a much larger pool of people, much larger talent pool if you are remote working. You definitely attract more people, and I mean, they're often more interesting people or more, well, I'll give you an example. So we were hiring for a relatively junior sales role, business development role. And we were recruiting, we can basically work with people who are anywhere in the EU. It's quite easy for us to do that. We have one person working in Vancouver, but he started in London and went to Vancouver, so it was okay. And we had 200-300 applications for that role. The last round of recruiting that we did in total, we had more than 800 applicants. So we get a lot of people applying. But we ended up, one of the 2 people that we hired into that role was not just a junior salesperson. She had actually run a 100-person marketing agency. So she had an enormous amount of experience, really talented and competent at a very high level. But she has children and she wants to live in part of Spain and commute between there and another part of Europe. And she has, her particular lifestyle doesn't really lend itself, and she doesn't particularly want to go to an office every day and work in an office and do that. She's very happy and delighted to, exercise her talent and her brain working remotely. So we would never have been able to hire this amazingly experienced and talented person at any amount of money, but certainly not for that salary that we were offering if we weren't a remote working agency. And the company is full of stories like that. We hired a marketing intern who is now a full-time and rostered member of staff, who had done a TED talk. Why? Because she wants to work remotely. She wanted to change her career and do something else. But just, so we have this amazing talent pool. And I think the other thing that helps with it doesn't work for everybody, but for people who make remote working a success, it helps a lot with retention. And I speak as a cynical, evil lance corporal of industry and capitalist stool, but capitalist tool, I should say. But if you get used to working remotely and you want to have this commuterless life, suddenly the thought of changing jobs becomes a lot scarier, because not only have you got to find a new job and make it work, you've also got to take on the cost of commuting, and you've got to start commuting again. You've got to move to a place where the job is at. So it's great for attracting talent. It's great for retaining talent. And it's good for the planet.
It is, and I would agree with you 100% on that. As you've been to San Francisco, so you know what our traffic situation is like. And I was consulting at a company for a year, and I lost 2 hours a day commuting into the office every day, and they offered me a full-time job. And I said, only if I can work from home at least 3 days a week. And they said, no. And I said, no, it's not worth, I don't want to lose 2 hours a day anymore.
Yeah, you've been on the other side of that equation. And the thing is that those 2 hours of the day come out of your time. They don't come out of company time.
Right.
So it's you're investing 10 hours a week in that, 40 hours a month in that business relationship for which you don't really get compensated.
Correct.
And I don't know about what the situation is in the US, but in the UK, you can't, the cost of commuting, the train tickets or the travel or the car, is also an employee cost. If I pay you money for that, you get taxed on it. So I might as well just pay you a salary. So, all that stuff, it's such a lot of money.
Yeah, I remember parking was $14 a day.
Well, I have my favorite story about parking in San Francisco is I remember in my rental car driving along a particular street, a very narrow street, and I was backed up. There's a little row of cars, and the car in front had stopped because they had spotted a parking space, or they thought someone, but it wasn't actually someone just leaving in their car. Somebody was stealing the car. So we all sat there. They smashed the window, broke in, hot rodded whatever that you do with a car to, jump started it, pulled off. The woman in the car in front of me was not interested in the fact that a robbery was taking place. She just wanted that parking space.
Yes,
she just sat there and waited for it to. That's how bad parking is in San Francisco. I know, I've seen it.
It is. It's another reason I don't live in the city of San Francisco. I live in the suburbs. I have lots of parking right outside my front window here.
Exactly.
So you seem very happy to be a remote employer. What do you think is the future of remote employment, and what do you think can be done differently to make it more efficient?
Well, of course, we're in this dreadful situation with the coronavirus, and it's a global experiment in remote working. So I think the future of remote working is you can't separate it from that experience. And I think that, one, a lot of employees are going to say, I quite like this. I'm very happy I don't have to commute. A lot of employers are going to say to themselves, do you know, I was really nervous about remote working, but actually it's not as bad as I thought it was. It's actually quite good. You might, in the scenario you just described, before they would have said, no, you can't work from home 3 days a week. Afterwards, they go, yeah, sure, why not? That's no problem at all. So I think there's going to be more openness to it. I think I think that the technology is evolving at a very rapid pace. So, you know, you're sitting there with this green screen picture of the Golden Gate Bridge behind you, but what are the next steps in that? You know, are we going to have high definition cameras? Are we going to have 3D cameras? You know, what used to be really quite sophisticated video conferencing technology and very expensive technology is now every day. I call my mother on Skype. Mm-hmm. So what is high-end video conferencing now will be on the desktop in 2-3 years. I mean, I remember when I was writing for Wired, going to MIT Media Lab in Boston, in Cambridge, and this was in the early 2000s as well. They had a video conferencing wall where you could just come and sit in front of on a couch and talk to colleagues at MIT Media Lab in Dublin, which doesn't exist anymore, but was mm-hmm. So it was like having a room that had two halves, one in Massachusetts mm-hmm. and one in Ireland. And I just thought that was amazing. But you could replicate that now. So I mean, I would imagine, for example, hybrid teams where some people are in an office and some people are at home, but having shared collaborative workspaces where you're still able to have that kind of casual relationship or that conversational relationship with people without it being like, I've got to make a Zoom call, I've got to schedule it in. So I think there's more development to have happen. And I think the last point I'd make around it is I think sometimes there's a bit of conference call fatigue, and I think there's going to be a challenge around making hybrid teams work where some people are in an office and some people are remote. There's a danger of cliques and exclusiveness, and you miss out on some of the communication. So I think that's a challenge that has to be solved, is to make it tolerable for longer and tolerable for in-house, out of our office teams to work together. That's the goal. That's the mission that has to be solved, I think. Yeah.
I agree. And I have no doubt that there are companies working on these issues as we speak, because it's here now. This period has proven that it can work. Not for all companies, but for a lot of companies, it can work.
And for some managers, they're never going to get there. There are definitely still managers who want to micro control people, who want to see, they don't just want the work, they want to see the hands working, you know, and who value face time over effort or over output. There's a lot of, I think it's going to expose a lot of bad managers, actually. I hope so.
It very possibly could, yes. They have a way of, hiding their weaknesses somehow. I don't know how, but yeah, I think you're right. I think over time it will. So,
well, if you shift the emphasis from presence to output or work or teamwork or collaboration over ego and individuality, for example, if you make that change, the people who are very good at BS and the people who are very good at managing their boss and looking like they're busy, and the people who take credit for other people's work, and the people who, that's much harder. But you do have to have a cultural shift to a company where, results are measured and output is measured and people are valued for their contribution and not just for their ability to manipulate the system.
Yeah. Yeah, I can tell you, like, working from home, without the 2-hour commute, at least an hour of that goes back to the company, just naturally, right? It's hard to explain, but, a 20-foot commute is a lot easier than getting up, and shaving, and do all the things that I have to do, and then driving in. And then when you get into work, you've just been in traffic for an hour, so you need to decompress a little. Like for me, I get up and go get a cup of coffee and turn on the computer. It's time to go.
Well, a lot of the work that people do who are remote working now is brain work, and there's absolutely no question that uninterrupted focus time leads to greater productivity.
Mm-hmm.
And it's quite hard to have uninterrupted focus time in an office.
It is.
There's a wonderful book called Peopleware by DeMarco Lister that talks a lot about this, about not having phones ringing, because that just destroys a whole room's productivity. And I think that people are also going to discover that the ability to sort of work in concentrated ways and choose when they want to communicate with people is going to be a factor. It's going to change, again, because, you don't hire people for their ability to sort of bully and bluster and BS. You hire people because they're creative, talented, hardworking individuals, or at least you hope they are.
Right.
And then for some reason, the companies put them in organizational structures and cultures where those attributes and talents are not valued, and negative ones are. Listen, I think there's a real danger of sort of going after coronavirus. Everything's going to be different, because I'm a great believer in reversion to the mean, but I think one of the changes will be an evolution of company culture, and good managers and good employees will have a new card in their deck that they can play.
Yes. Interesting. And it's funny because you brought up phone calls, and most people think, a phone call coming into you. Well, that can happen at home or at the office, but you've been in offices where there's probably 10 people within a few yards of you. It's other people's calls too, that it's you can't not hear them. It's impossible.
Yeah. And I mean, the phone calls are like baby screaming. They're designed to attract your attention. That ringtone is there to make you pay attention to it.
Yeah.
So, and people coming around and tapping you on the shoulder, or your colleague coming over and, how's it going? All that stuff. It's all non-maskable interrupts, to use a old technical term. And I think that's well, I'm at home now with my wife and my cat, and both of them are non-maskable interrupts. They pop in and say hello. So everyone else has sort of gained the ability to concentrate. I've gained, well, the cat's always here, but my wife isn't normally working from home. So I've gained someone who interrupts me, whereas everyone else has lost interruptions.
I see.
But she's welcome. I like to see her. It's nice to have her around.
I'm sure she's a very
If you're listening.
You'll be married a long time. So
I think the journalist Alistair Cook said the secret of a happy marriage is frequent separation and increasing deafness.
There is some truth to that, yes.
Some truth to it, yes. Anyway, sorry, I interrupted you. You were going to say something.
So we haven't talked about articulate marketing yet. What is the story about it? What do you offer? Who are your clients? Things like that. And what's the journey been like?
Well, okay. Articulates, we're 19 people. Digital marketing, inbound marketing. We're very influenced by the HubSpot approach, as well as using their software. And we help mostly technology companies, but not exclusively, reach new customers, raise their profile online, sharpen their differentiation, sharpen their message, use content, primarily blogging, but other things as well, to get visitors to come to their website. And then we do all that lead capture and lead nurturing and sales automation, so marketing automation, to take people through a sales funnel and hopefully get more business for our clients. So we're ultimately focused on that pivotal bit at the bottom of the funnel where a lead becomes a customer. But we do all the bits from that point up to, I've never heard of this company, and here's an answer to an internet question, and let's get them from Google to the website. So we're interested in that whole funnel. Historically, as I say, when I sold my games company, I didn't quite know what to do, and I was a freelance journalist for a little while. But because of that freelance journalism, I was offered some corporate writing gigs, and I was very lucky that Microsoft was my first corporate client. So I started at the top, I was working for these very big companies. And from that, I was working for Packard and Symantec and various other people. So I worked my way through enterprise level of corporate journalism, copywriting, content creation, I suppose you'd call it. 5 years ago, 7, 8 years ago, I hired my first employee after Intelligent Games. I broke that rule. And that was Liz Fielder, who is now our Chief Happiness Officer. But I hired her as my PA originally. Her role has evolved. And then I hired some writers and moved into becoming an agency rather than becoming a specialist individual. About 5 years ago, we discovered HubSpot, and we evolved the agency again to deal with that full funnel and not just the copywriting bit of it, and to develop the software and to use the software for our clients. So we've effectively become, I mean, it's a dreadful term, but a full service marketing agency as a result of that over the last few years. And hopefully that's just the beginning. We're very, very fortunate, very lucky that business is very good at the moment. We've signed 4 new clients since the virus lockdown began, which I'm eternally grateful for. But I'm hoping we're going to come out of this stronger, faster, better.
Very good. And are your customers all over the world? Are they mainly EU or?
There is a growing number in the US, and right now of our main retainer clients, and that's where most of our work is now. About a third are in the US, and the rest are in the UK, with 1 in Germany. Oh, and 1 in Finland. Yes. So a little bit, yeah. So probably 10-20% EU, 30-ish% US, the rest UK. So, and that's another thing about remote working, is it doesn't really matter if you haven't got an office, you're not tied to a catchment area. Yes.
Wow, very good. So it sounds like you started with the idea of remote from day one. How did you incorporate it from day one? Because it had to be, since you were used to that going into an office, how did you incorporate it, you yourself?
Well, when Liz started, it was very much the intention that she would be a virtual PA, meaning, because I didn't want to have an office. I mean, I was working from home. I didn't want to have an office in my home for my PA to come and sit here. Why? I mean, so I think in a way she provided the template for doing that, and her way of work. I mean, I hired her. She was on the payroll. It wasn't a virtual PA in the sense that I was time slicing or sharing her with other people, but she worked from her home, and we set up a phone system so I could transfer calls and she could take calls for me. And we started doing a bit of video conferencing and on Skype back in those days. And it just seemed very natural, actually. And so I was lucky in a way that I started with her for the work she was doing. And then I hired a writer and another writer and another writer. And they just came in on the same basis. And it never occurred to me that I ought to go and get an office. The crunch point came, actually, hiring a few people working remotely is not that difficult. When we got to about 5 or 6 people, there started to feel like a need for some attention on the culture. And culture is a very grand word for saying, how do you work together? And what are the rules of engagement? And what's the etiquette of being an employee here? And everybody sort of understands how that etiquette works in an office. Right. But it was new, and we had to work it out. And so we worked with a wonderful HR consultant who helped us sort of think about our culture a bit, and came in and did some workshops. And we've kept that effort up. It's been something we continually revisit. And indeed, when Liz became Chief Happiness Officer, that was part of that deliberate attention effort on the culture and on the way of working. So yeah, it does take some work. You can't just sort of assume it will be fine. You have to make it work.
Well, it takes work when you have an office too, by the way. It's just
for sure. But that people sort of understand the mechanics of that a bit better. You say, "Oh, just can you come into my office?" Or "My door's always open," or management by wandering around. All the metaphors of management, for example, all involve engagement in an office. They're all literally, "My door is always open" is not a metaphor that works for remote working, for example. Right. By the way, it's also one of the great lies of management, because you say "my door is always open." You actually have to invite people in. Mm-hmm. You actually have to say, not just "my door is always open," but "can I have a chat now? Let's talk about, let's get into that a little bit." Or how you. So one of the things we do is very, very regular one-to-ones and very regular team and company stand-ups remotely, and also these company meetings.
Oh, very nice. So we've talked about the pandemic, and it's caused a lot of companies to go remote. you already were remote, but did the current pandemic cause any major roadblocks or challenges that you didn't expect?
Well, like a lot of owner managers, business owners, I'm, very anxious when it kicked off. I'm anxious now. It's a horrible situation. And I think we didn't break stride in terms of switching to remote working. And I think it was a factor with this new client acquisition, that they wanted to be sure that they had, marketing was important. They wanted a marketing agency that wasn't disrupted. So no, that wasn't any kind of hit for us, that transition. But what did take a lot of time was staff well-being and thinking about the implications of, for example, relatively young single people in flats around Europe, where, if I was in an office, I could get in a car and go and, take deliveries to my staff, or I could make sure they're okay. If you're in close proximity, but I can't do anything for somebody who's in Valencia or Vienna or Bucharest from London. I can't. Literally, you can't get there from here now.
Right.
So that was a concern, and we're a certified B Corp, and we value the relationship that we have with our staff very highly. It's a very important part of the way we do business. And so we spent quite a lot of time, Liz and I, and with our HR company, thinking about how we could support people remotely. And we made some changes, like people can book. Well, we gave them a year's worth of holiday time at the beginning of March. So just, if you need to take time off, take time off. And we let them. These are all small things, but we let them change their self-approve their holiday requests. So, if they need to take a day off to go and do something with the kids, or they take a week off to do something, just do it. You don't need permission. Just have as many days as you want. Book it off when you want. No names, no pack drill. We also got everybody access to an online virtual doctor. So if they needed to talk to a doctor, they could just, we would pay for that. And we set up a buddy system as well. So everybody in the company has two buddies, right? So one is we need to come up with better words for this. One is your listener and one is your talker. So for the people that I am the listener to, every week I have to have a half-hour call with them. It's in the job description now. You have to do this. And if I'm your listener, I'm just asking you, how's it going? Tell me about that. What's the problem with that? I'm trying to coach, counsel, support, help you. It's not a business relationship. It's literally to do with, for example, I'm the listener to our bookkeeper who's got a couple of kids and she's homeschooling, and so I'm very interested in learning about how she's doing that and trying to help. And then but I also have someone who's listening to me. So I can turn around to them and go, "Oh, that's really stressful," or I'm not getting out enough exercise, or I'm worried about my mum. And the thinking was that, okay, that's a morale support. There's somebody there for you in the company, but also that we set up some mechanisms where they can reach back into the company to get more resources, like counselling, or if they need to get deliveries, we've got an Amazon Prime account and things like that, just in case we need to suddenly rally around and support someone. Happily, nobody appears to have been infected by this in the company, although I coughed a bit in March. I was worrying about that maybe I had it. But we didn't know how whether we were going to suddenly find that half our staff were sick, and we needed to make sure we had support for them and for their reassurance and their so that, stuff like that, just stuff like that. And every company is doing it, but every company is also struggling with, now we've got to all work remotely. We have to make our processes remote. We have to figure out video conferencing. We have to do the security. And we didn't have to deal with any of that. We just went straight into employee support.
Yeah, I don't think every company is doing that right now. I think more companies are worrying about, I think they've gotten it licked now, turning remote. At first, that was a big challenge for a lot of companies.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because if let's say you have 20 employees, they all come into the office every day.
Well,
some of them
if they haven't got laptops, where literally the mechanics are not there.
Yeah,
gosh, I hadn't even thought about that.
And then there's security, VPNs and all that stuff. Those all come into play, depending on the company. So there are companies like Gaper that help develop, build, and scale products for startups. you're a big believer in remote employment. How do you think this is going to evolve for companies that, especially startups, that need to hire quality employees and hire them now? Seems like you've got it licked, but for other companies.
Yeah, I think if you're trying to hire quickly, I think it pays to think about your employer brand and what you're offering to people. And, sure, salary and perks, benefits, sick leave, holiday pay, those kinds of things are, if you're off the market, or you're off the pace, or you're sort of, they could be negatives. But actually, if you want the really best people, you've got to have something positive to say to them. You'll have a story to tell them about what it's like to work in a company. And I think that's one of the things that I've been really proud of and really excited about at Articulate. We've been able to use, for us, remote working as part of that story of like, okay, you can go and get an office job, or you can come to work like this with us. And at first, people were a bit hesitant, a bit wary of it. But as I said, end of last year, when we did our last recruitment round, we were overwhelmed with candidates. We didn't pay for any advertising. We didn't do it. They just came to us. So remote working is part of the employee brand. I mean, for us also being a B Corp, because we tend to hire younger people, and it's a cliche, and I don't like talking about millennials, but younger people they want to belong to a company that reflects their values and their aspirations. They're not salary men who are in a job for life just because it pays the mortgage. That if they don't like it, they'll just go and write a novel. I mean, they're not. So they want something that they can believe in. I think that's been really important for us. I think also, who knows what the economy is going to be like after this is over. But the opportunity is still there for startups and entrepreneurs to hire, in a way, perhaps hire even better and more amazing people. But the mechanisms by which you do that and the way you attract those people don't change. But now, potentially, because of this is a very good time to recruit, I think. And companies that hire well, market well, and plan well during recessions tend to come out of recessions much stronger, and companies that don't tend to go under. And so I know this is a bit Pollyanna-ish, and I don't want to play down the crisis, and I know a lot of people are suffering right now, but there is a sort of opportunity inside the stress for business that you can position to come out of this stronger, I think. And recruitment is one of the ways to do that.
Yeah, actually, they say that recession is the best time to market, because you're laying the groundwork for when you come out.
Yeah, well, lousy captains don't set sail in a storm, but good captains get through them, right?
That's right. That's a good saying, yes. So
Matthew, I could find a better way of putting it, but you understand what I mean.
We understand, yes. Well, Matthew, this has been fascinating. I love what you're doing. I think Articulate Marketing sounds like a great place to work. If I have any friends that are looking for jobs, and I think I would refer them. And I want to thank you for your time today.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. Thank you very much for letting me spout off and talk about all this. I've enjoyed it.
Oh yeah, and have a great night.
And you. Thank you very much.
Bye.